So just to recap very quickly. So we spoke about how there are 613 commandments, 248 positive commandments, 365 negative commandments. We said that each commandment really relates to a different part of the body. And each time we perform that commandment, that mitzvah, whichever it may be, it activates that specific part of the body that it's connected to. We also said that in general, behind every mitzvah, and particularly also the study of Torah, there should be passion and the most positive and selfless intention. And those are summed up in those two emotions of ahava and yira, love and fear. And the Tanya also says that the love and the fear behind every mitzvah, or as that serve as the engine to every mitzvah, are really also the wings that allow us to fly. When we do a mitzvah without that intention, if you recall right from last week, without the ahava and yira, then the mitzvah is a mitzvah, but it doesn't fly. Same with prayer. The prayer is the prayer, but it doesn't fly and reach the throne of glory. It doesn't connect as deeply and as effectively as it could. So that was really the big idea of last week. And let's continue on here at the bottom of page 126, as mentioned. Does anyone want to read? Anyone?
I'll read if nobody else will.
Thank you, Margaret.
Okay. For one cannot truly cleave to him except through fulfillment of the 248 positive commandments. A frequently reoccurring question is, how can one cleave to God? We know how to unite with something physical, such as a human being, but how can we unite with something that has no physical form? Indeed, no form at all, to something infinite and undefinable. A person can feel love for God, can yearn for God, can proclaim, my soul thirsts for God, but this only expresses his yearning. It does not consummate his love. It does not join him to God. At times, a person might feel attached to God, but such a feeling by definition is virtually never genuine.
Right, because and we spoke a little bit about that, there's two types of love. There's a love that's very selfish. I don't really love the other. I love what the other person brings me. But there's a love where I can actually fulfill the love. If I love the other, I want to do what the other wants. The question is, how can I love God, the infinite? I can't grasp the infinite. So how can I know how to actually love him? How can I fulfill that love? If it's a human being, I know I can fulfill the love. I know I can understand what that human being is all about that I'm loving. I can understand his desires, his needs, and I can fulfill them with love. And that's the ultimate fulfillment of my love. But God is infinite. So how can we even begin to understand what he really desires, what he really needs, and how can therefore that love that we have towards him be fulfilled? That's the big question, and that I think is an infinite question. It has an answer, and the answer is coming very in the next paragraph here, but I think it's a question that we deal with all the time, whether consciously or subconsciously. There's this yearning that a person has, that a yearning of love, that in a way, even when we fulfill that which needs to be fulfilled in order to actualize that love, as Rabbi Stans is about to say in his commentary, that yearning is still there. Basically, the answer is, how can you fulfill your love towards God? Doing mitzvahs. The mitzvahs that God tells us to do are really a reflection of his deepest desire. God commands us, do A and do B. That means he desires A and B. So if we love God, we do A and B, and that's the way to fulfill that love. Otherwise, there really would be no way for us to grasp the infinite. But when the infinite tells you, okay, do A and do B, then you know exactly how to actualize it. But still, I'm saying even further than that. Even when you do A, and even when you do B, there's still this sense of a void of, okay, I did A and I did B, but I still love you, God, and I still want to fulfill that love. And so you do another mitzvah, and yes, absolutely, it's very fulfilling. But in a way, with our relationship to God, because we're finite and he's infinite, there's always that gap that always feels, always leaves a feeling of unfulfillment, of this yearning that cannot be fulfilled. You know, in a way, it's interesting, but the Kabbalists speak about this. And this already borders on the line of psychology, but so when we go to the bathroom, there's a blessing that we say after that, right? It's the blessing called Asher Yatzar, and we thank God really for creating all these, this mechanism of our body that enables us to go to the bathroom. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able, as we say in the blessing, to live for even 1 hour. Afilu sha'a achat. That's the way it is. Now, when we speak about the body mechanism in that blessing, we say nekavim, nekavim, chalulim, chalulim. We speak about holes in the body. And the author of the prayer really mentions 2 types of holes that are called nekavim and holes that are called chalulim. The difference between the two is even though they are both translated as holes, is that nekavim are holes that are meant to be filled. Chalulim are holes that cannot be filled. 2 types of holes in the human body. But the Kabbalists speak about 2 types of holes in life. There are holes that can be filled. So I feel hungry, so I eat, and that's it. Now my hunger is gone. So that hole is filled. And it's true soulfully. I feel a certain soulful hunger, so I go and I pray, and I go and do mitzvah. That hole is filled. But there's an underlying hole that can never be filled, and that's chalulim, chalulim. It's not meant to be filled also. That hole that cannot be filled is actually what propels me to do more, to want more, and to grow, and to continue to connect. That's the chalulim. So with our love to God, there is a love that can be satisfied, and that's the love of doing mitzvahs, as he's about to say. But there's a love that's underlying that can, in a way, never be satisfied. It's what, again, pushes us to want to connect more and more and more and more. It's the way we were created. There's a halal, to the point that King David himself says in the book of Psalm, "Velibi halal bekirbi," which means that my heart is completely void, completely open in the deepest me, bekirbi, because King David again was a man who searched for that yearning. I mean, you see it all over his book of Psalms. Every psalm is really a shout of yearning, but there's a hole that's always there. Why is that? If we had to analyze it here based on what this is saying, that's because, again, at the end of the day, we're finite and we face the infinite, and that infinity awakens that unfulfilled hole all the time. Just to give an analogy, not a good one, but an analogy to that. You know, if you stand next to if you go to the zoo and you see a beautiful animal, so fine, you saw a nice animal, it created the sense of wonder, wow. And you say, okay, I've seen this animal, I studied about this animal, I can see how it eats, how it sleeps. My yearning now for seeing this specific animal has been fulfilled. But then you go to Mount Everest, and you stand in front of Mount Everest, and you say to yourself, wow, now that's a wonder. It's not just another animal. It's not just another beautiful creation. And you can stand in front of Mount Everest all your life, but there's the sense of, wow, this is so much greater than me. I'll never be able to grasp what is going on there. And in a way, that's God. And a million times more, infinitely times more. It's a Mount Everest that gives us the sense of, wow, I'll never be able to fill that void. I can try and climb the mountain. I can try and do one mitzvah. And that will certainly fulfill some void. It will fulfill the nekavim. But the chalulim will never be there completely fulfilled, because again, at the end of the day, it's us finite beings facing this infinite. And in a way, it's part of this dance between human beings and God. It's part of this, concerto, to use a musical analogy. It's like it's an ongoing dance or ballet between God and the human being wanting to come close, and in a way doing things to come close, but on the other hand also knowing that there's this awesomeness that leaves an eternal void within. That eternal void is not negative, it's positive, again, because it propels us to action. But we also have to understand that as finite beings, we'll never be able to fulfill that whole, that chalulim completely. So that's that's to expound on what he's just saying. But again, this shouldn't be a monologue. So feel free to say what you think, disagree, offer any comments.
What's coming to mind as it is two different things, and one is so the deepest underlying longing in human life is oneness with the divine,
right?
Is sort of merging in the divine, and yet obviously it's the most elusive thing we could desire. And so what in my field of psychology, which is it's not Western, it's a mystical psychology, we look at how everything we express according to our capacity to relate to it is, like some people find that oneness at a football match. And right. Some people find it in helping others, like, like disaster, like going to a disaster area and helping, or, doing service, whatever, but it's the same desire behind everything. Right. And so as we sublimate or relate to that desire on higher and higher levels in ourself, it becomes, a higher manifestation.
Right.
So, and then there's this philosopher whose work I read that said, as we rise up, as we purify ourselves and understand and rise up, it takes every sort of thing that we do takes effort to we have to study and meditate and, as you say, do service, and right. But when we reach that sort of highest, that the final barrier, you have to let go of everything.
Right. So right. Right. Very good. Right. Right. I love that. In a way, it reminds me of what the Zohar says about the goal of knowledge, tachlit hayediah shelo leida, in the words of the Zohar, which means the goal of knowledge is to not know. And what does that mean? I mean, it sounds like an oxymoron. The goal of knowledge is to know. No, but the Zohar tells you the goal of knowledge is to not know. And what this really means is that the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Mm-hmm. The more you connect to the infinite, the more you realize, boy, this is the infinite. I thought the infinite could be grasped by my finite being, but the more you dig into it, the more you realize you don't know. And therefore, in a way, like you say, Margot, the only way really then to connect to it when you go deeper and deeper is by letting go of your ego, almost allowing your fire to touch God's fire and then becoming one with it. There's a reason why the soul is compared to the candle of God, a fire, because in a way, again, it's reflective of that deep yearning. Fire can never rest. Water can rest. Water is fine with resting. It can sit in a hole. It can sit in a cup forever. But we're not made of water. I mean, the body maybe is made of 70% water, whatever it is. But a soul is not made of water. It's made of fire. Now, Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. That's why we light a fire when there's a yahrzeit to represent a soul. But again, King Solomon says that the soul of man is like a candle of God. The fire can never be satisfied. Yes, you can throw wood into it. You can throw a piece of wood into it. You can somehow, but it can never be satisfied. It's always yearning to go up and up and up and up. And in a way, the ultimate yearning of that fire is to go back to its source. That ball of fire came from. So, tachlit hayediah shelo leida, the goal of knowing, the goal of that fire is, let me leave my wax. Let me let go of everything that I have in this world. I want to be one with God. I had the privilege, and it's not for, but I can quote just one line of it, but I had the immense privilege, blessing of seeing a part of the will that Rabbi Steinsaltz left behind him. He wrote a will against his will, and no pun intended here. But 30 years ago, he was facing a life-threatening surgery, and he had a few months to prepare for it. And the doctor told him, you have 50% chance of dying. It was a 26-hour surgery, and thank God I think we spoke about this, but thank God he survived. But before his surgery, he wrote his will. And in his will, he wrote about his his work and his intention behind it all, what he tried to do. And can't quote it. After the Shloshim, I think the family will publish it, and then it will be made public. But one of the expressions he uses there is Esh ba'ara betochi, moved me deeply, which means a fire was burning within me. And he speaks about how he wanted to do a lot and a lot and a lot. And in a way, when you have that fire, it can fulfill a lot, because that fire again pushes you to want to know, to want to connect, to want to do. But it can never be satisfied too. Once you contage with that fire, that's it. You'll always live a restless life. I remember that I was once blessing someone in front of Rabbi Steinsaltz, and I blessed that person with serenity. And Rabbi Steinsaltz called me aside afterwards and he said, serenity? If you live a meaningful life, there's no serenity. you can't bless people with serenity. It doesn't exist. You either bless them with a meaningful life or you bless them with serenity. But then he said, you know who has serenity? Dead people. In their grave, they have serenity. But it's true. If you're alive, if you want to connect, there's no serenity. The fire has no serenity. Water has serenity, but not fire. And that's what we're speaking about, right? This constant wanting to know leaves more and more a feeling of the not knowing. And at one point you are almost forced to make that decision. Okay, am I going to stop the fire from burning? Am I going to just revert to being a body, a mass of existence in this world? Or am I going to live? Am I actually going to live? Am I actually going to allow that fire to burn from within, to propel me to do more and more and more? That void will always be there, but at least it will, again, be an active void, something that pushes me forward and upward. And if you are really in tune with your soul, you know that you're a fire. And you know that you have to choose that path. That means that you won't have peace of mind, you won't have serenity, but that's the way it is. Maybe that's why the Talmud states very quickly, and Rashi states it in the context of Jacob, our forefather. He quotes that piece of the Talmud, but Jacob, who had a very, very harsh life, forefather, the one that the people of Israel are named after, the children of Israel, we call Bnei Israel. Jacob's name was Israel, also given to him by an angel of God. Now, Jacob had a very hard life, and his brother wanted to kill him. He went and he had to work for his first wife, who was substitute for his wife, and he was cheated, and he had to work 7 more years, and we all know the story. And his children didn't behave the best. 2 of them murdered a whole town, the town of Shechem, all the males of that town. Anyway, he had many white hairs, and for good reasons. And finally, towards the end of his life, Vayeshev Yaakov Biver Shava. Vayeshev Yaakov Be'eretz Megurei Aviv, sorry. Vayeshev Yaakov Be'eretz Megurei Aviv finally goes back to his land, right? Going through Shechem, back to his land, and he dwells there. And Rashi points out, foremost a commentary points out, why does the Torah use the word Vayeshev? And he dwelled more than Vayagur. He should have, and he lived there. What does it mean, Vayeshev? And Rashi explains that Jacob, after having lived such a hard life, Bikesh Yaakov leishev b'shalva. He wanted to sit in peace, in serenity. He was an old man already. He says, come on, God, give me some peace of mind. I've lived a very tough life. What happens to him then? Kafatz alav rogzo shel Yosef, as Rashi says. Jacob wanted to sit in peace. God says, no, if you're going to live a fulfilling life, a meaningful life, there's no such thing as peace of mind. And then Joseph's story, saga, came to it, where his brothers, Joseph's brothers, his own children were fighting, and they kidnapped Joseph and sold him to slavery. Jacob thought he was going to sit now in serenity. He had even more suffering after that. And then Rashi ends his commentary by quoting that passage from the Talmud, because the righteous tzaddikim, they have no rest, no serenity, not in this world and not in the world to come. Even in the world to come, they work on our behalf. Even in the world to come, they shake the heavens and say, God, there's evil in this world. You got to fix it. Bring Mashiach. The time has come. But we have there's no such thing. We're fires. If we're fires, there's no rest.
I'm going to watch very carefully when you do your blessings from now on. Find out what you're saying.
Yeah, I haven't used that. I haven't used that in a long
Rabbi, it would
Yes,
seem
Ronnie.
that if you have love in your heart for God, and I hear everything you're saying, I don't disagree at all.
Right.
If you have love in your heart for God and you've accepted God in your heart, and you can feel a oneness with God, even in the worst of times, that you can still have peace, knowing that God is there.
Right. No, it's an excellent point. You're right, Ronnie, because that oneness gives us a sense of wholesomeness, of I'm wholesome, I'm not broken into pieces. On the other hand, it also, it's almost like a double-edged sword. It also tells us, well, if I'm one with God, God doesn't just want me to dwell in my peace, in that wholesomeness that I'm feeling. He wants me to be his ambassador in the world. So it propels us to action. So it's almost, I would say, it's almost like a tree. We just read this last week. Ki adam etz hasadeh. Man is like the field of the tree. What does that mean? A tree that's healthy is a tree that's steeply rooted. There's a oneness there with the ground that's unbreakable with its roots. On the other hand, a tree that's healthy is also a tree that doesn't stop growing. It stops growing, that's when it dries up and it dies. And right, I think Ronnie, and correct me if that's what you were saying or not. But on the one hand, being connected to God gives us this ability to be deeply rooted, and to even when storms come, we're there standing strong and tall. But on the other hand, it also means that we have to keep growing. Right?
And again, I can't disagree with anything that you're saying, but you talked about being an ambassador. And right. Are you a better ambassador when people can feel that you're, even in the craziest of times, that you still have this peace in your heart? And that's what, for me, that's what I would want to spread. I would want them to know that, and it's not that it's in my mind, and not doing mitzvahs for the sake of doing mitzvahs, but because it's part of your life. It's who you are. Right.
No, very good. Very good. As Rabbi Strauss, we would use the word to infect people with that connection. Right. I agree. Absolutely. In a way, when again, going back to the analogy of the tree, I don't know if it's a good one or a bad one. Analogy of the tree. The ultimate tree also gives seeds to create more of those trees, and that's what it desires to do. At the end of the day, the tree wants to give its fruits so that the world can enjoy them, but also grow them. So you're Absolutely. Right, to give that same sense of connection.
Yeah, thank you.
Rabbi?
Yes, Anna.
Yes, on that sense, I was just thinking that meditation, when we meditate, it's not like the feel good, just feel ease, feeling that we should be pursuing, but the connection, the oneness. That's right. There are people here that know more about meditation than myself, but just this connection is the purpose, more than just the feel good, relaxed, right?
Right, absolutely. Right, I think that, Margot, maybe you can speak a little bit more.
Yeah, I was thinking of her.
But I'm saying, I think that's the ultimate meditation. I think it's true in prayer too, that we become so one with God that we allow God to speak through us. It's interesting, but the climax of the prayer, of every prayer, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, is the Amidah Prayer. How do we begin the Amidah Prayer? We say, Hashem sefatai tiftach ufi agi teilatecha. What does that mean? God, open up my mouth and let my mouth speak your glory. What does that mean? God, speak through me. Me alone, if it's just about me and my ego, my being, I'm limited. How can I even connect to you? I'm just another body. But if my body itself speaks your glory, if you become so one with me that it's my body singing your glory. It's not me. It's not about me and my voice. It's your voice. My body is just becoming a vehicle for you, a channel for your light, a channel for your glory, for your words. Then I can speak. Then I can connect. Then I can have an Amidah. That's why we open up rally. I've used this example before, but I think it's what differentiates between a good musician and an excellent musician. A good musician can play an instrument well. An excellent musician doesn't just play the instrument well. It's the only thing you see playing. He becomes a vehicle to the instrument. She becomes a vehicle to the instrument. It's not two different pieces, the musician and the instrument. It's one piece. It's the instrument playing through that musician. It's like that person doesn't even exist. Mm-hmm. And that's the Amidah, Hashem Sefatai Tiftach. We say that in the Shabbat prayer. I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thought. It's really an amazing, the prayer itself, really, I would encourage everyone to meditate on it. But it's prayer just before the Yishtabach in the Shabbat morning prayer. It's called Nishmat Kol Chai, the soul of every living being. Nishmat Kol Chai. And then we say to God, even if our mouth was full of song like the sea. The sea is infinite. So if we had infinite song in our mouth, and our tongues could sing like its waves, and our lips would be as full of praise like the horizons of the skies. And you continue with all these analogies, right? And our eyes could light up like the sun and the moon. And anyway, even though we had all the qualities in the world, even if we could do magic with our being, still we would not be able to praise you because we are finite and you're infinite. So what do we say? Al-Kain, we say to God, and because it's impossible really to connect to you as individual beings, Al-Kain, therefore, the limbs that you created in us, and the soul and the spirit that you breathed within us, let them do the singing themselves. Let your creation reflect you. We can't do it ourselves. As individual beings, as separated beings from you, it's impossible, even if we have the greatest gifts. The only thing we can do is allow us, our creation, which is actually yours, reflect you. Let you sing through us. Let them do the work. It's like we want to be so one with you that you just do your magic through us. It's not about us. And that's right. So that's the ultimate oneness find in I think every meditation and every prayer. And when you become so one with God, then indeed that fire illuminates. It creates wonders. Right, Margot, do you want to elaborate on that?
If I had to...
Or anyone else? Yeah.
If I had to define meditation, it would be, we turn our attention inward, and there's the outer rough self that we learn little by little to fine-tune our awareness to distinguish truth from untruth, so to develop discernment about all the voices and impulses and habits and impressions that we've accumulated, and we as we identify that that's what they are, we transcend them, and we seek to obviously merge with the inner divine. So it's a path of like fine-tuning awareness and discernment, and in the end surrender.
Right.
That the carrot dangling in front.
Right. Very good. Very good. Beautiful. Okay. Anyone else? Does anyone have any other comment? Anything else? Otherwise, we can continue just a few more lines. No? Okay. So let's continue. Margot, you want to continue? Let's go.
Sure.
Margot.
The way to attach oneself to God in truth is not by the means of a self-generated feeling of yearning for God, but as our author says here, by fulfilling the 248 positive commandments. Thus, the author will explain in chapter 40, Isaiah's statement, "Ho, everyone that thirsts, come ye to the waters." On the face of it, the verse doesn't seem to be telling us anything. Obviously, one who is thirsty should go drink water. And if we are to interpret the verse metaphorically as a reference to Torah, per Talmud Bava Kama, there is no water save for Torah. Again, one who thirsts for Torah should obviously partake of Torah. Rabbi Shneur Zalman, however, explains that the verse is telling us a profound truth regarding man's efforts to relate to God. Whoever thirsts for God, for connection to the divine, should go to the water, to Torah. One who is physically thirsty knows that he needs water, but one who thirsts for God does not necessarily know that he needs Torah. He yearns for God, and he is told to go and study about the bull that gored the cow. This approach to relating to God is far from self-evident. Indeed, it runs contrary to one's natural inclinations. So Isaiah proclaims, "Let whoever thirsts go to the water." That is, one cannot truly cleave to him except through fulfillment of the 248 commandments.
Right. Okay. There's a lot being said, and I think we'll elaborate on that a little more next week. But basically, again, the Torah itself is compared to that water that fulfills a thirsty soul. And the multiple verses here that come to prove this. But in general, what this is saying is that it's not just the Torah itself, but it's also the Torah that if you learn Torah just to learn Torah, then really you're learning it, you're not connecting to God. You're connecting to the pleasure that God, the intellectual pleasure at least, that God gives you. So why learn Torah? To fulfill the Torah. So the best way to quench that thirst is not just to say, I'm going to study Torah, which is a mitzvah in and of itself, and that's great. But the purpose of studying the Torah is in order to fulfill it and to translate it into action. Once you've translated it into action, to those 248 commandments, which are the positive commandments, right? Not the inaction, but the action itself, then you will be quenching that thirst. I just want to relate yet to the verse that Rabbi Stein's quotes in his commentary, from the Talmud that says that there's no water save for Torah. And Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi himself speaks about how the Torah itself is compared to water and why. And so this is one reason, because again, it quenches the thirst of the soul, just like physical water quenches the thirst of the body, but also because water comes from very up high, comes from the rain itself. So too, Torah, we have to recognize, comes from up high and came down to this world to make it grow. And the Torah came, when we think of Torah as water, then we will maybe have also this humility towards the Torah. It came from a place much higher than we are. And it came here really to make us grow. So we have to be able to treat it also with that mentality, with that perspective, and at the same time recognize that it's there to make us grow. If we use it just to have a nice little read and then make us fall asleep, then really we didn't use the Torah as it was, with the intention with which it was created. That's another reason why Torah is compared to water. A third reason why Torah is compared to water is also because water is probably one of the strongest elements in this world. And there we go to the story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, who at the age of 40 was a poor shepherd, ignorant shepherd. And he noticed a sight as he was shepherding his sheep in the mountains of a drop of water falling time and time again on the same spot of a rock. And he realized that after time, this was making a hole in the rock. And he said to himself, gosh, if water can make a hole in the rock, maybe the waters of the Torah can make a hole in my rock. I'm so ignorant. I have a complete rock right here, but the waters of the Torah will certainly penetrate this rock. And he decided to go and study. He studied for 24 years and became the legendary Rabbi Akiva as we know him today. But that's yet another reason why Torah is compared to water, because it is indeed one of the strongest elements that can penetrate even the toughest rocks. So here's a third reason of why Torah is compared to water. But in general, going back to this essential reason, the water is there of the Torah to quench our thirst. And each time we study Torah, each time we engage in translating the words of the Torah into action, then we can fulfill the thirst of the soul, and in a way continue to grow, continue to make our tree produce those fruits.